Why you know English vocabulary but can't use it. Narrator Daniel. I knew the word. I recognized it instantly. But when I needed it, my mouth stayed empty. People think the problem is vocabulary. They say learn more words, memorize lists, use flashcards. I did all of that. My head was full of English vocabulary. But when I tried to speak, nothing came out. The word was there somewhere, just not when I needed it. That moment changes how you see English because you realize something painful. Knowing vocabulary and using vocabulary are not the same skill. And if you don't fix this, your English will always stay in your head, never in your voice. Segment 1. Narrator Daniel. For years, I believed my English problem was simple. I thought I needed more vocabulary. Every time I failed to speak, I blamed missing words. So I did what everyone suggested. I memorized lists. I used flashcards. I downloaded apps. I learned synonyms, idioms, advanced expressions. On paper, my vocabulary was strong. In real life, it disappeared. I could recognize words instantly when I read them. I could understand them when I heard them. If someone used a word in a sentence, my brain said, yes, I know that. But when it was my turn to speak, my mind went blank. The word was there. I knew it was there, but I couldn't reach it. That gap confused me more than not knowing the word at all. Because if you don't know a word, the problem is clear. You learn it. But when you know a word and still can't use it, the problem feels personal. It feels like something is wrong with you. That is the moment many learners quietly give up. They stop trying to speak. They keep studying silently. They tell themselves they are not ready yet. I told myself the same thing. But one day I asked a different question. If I know so much English vocabulary, why can't I use it when it matters? The answer changed everything. Vocabulary knowledge and vocabulary access are not the same thing. Most learners build recognition vocabulary, words they can recognize when they see or hear them. But speaking requires recall vocabulary. Words your brain can pull out instantly under pressure. I had trained one skill and expected the other to work automatically. It doesn't. This is the first lesson you need to understand. Lesson 1. Recognizing a word is passive. Using a word is active. Reading and listening train recognition. Speaking requires retrieval. And retrieval only improves through use in context. I realized my vocabulary learning had been disconnected from real situations. I learned words in isolation, on lists, in apps, without emotion, without timing, without pressure. My brain stored those words like files in a cabinet, organized, accurate, but slow to access. Conversation does not wait for filing systems, it demands instant response. That is why the word disappears when you need it. Another mistake I made was chasing advanced vocabulary. I believed better words would make me sound fluent. In reality, advanced words increased pressure. They gave me more options to search through when speaking. That slowed me down even more. Lesson 2. More vocabulary can make speaking harder if your brain cannot retrieve it fast. Native speakers do not use the biggest words they know, they use the fastest ones. Speed matters more than variety in real conversation. Once I understood this, I stopped adding new words for a while. Instead, I focused on using the words I already knew. That decision felt uncomfortable, almost lazy, but it was necessary. I started noticing how often simple words appeared in real English, not just in casual talk, but in articles, interviews, discussions. The same basic vocabulary repeated again and again. English is built on a small core of words used in many ways. Lesson 3. Fluency comes from flexible use of simple vocabulary, not from knowing rare words. This realization changed how I saw my problem. I was not bad at English, I was overloaded. My brain knew too many words that had no clear path to usage. So I made a small change. Instead of learning new vocabulary, I took 5 common words I already knew and forced myself to use them in different situations, out loud, in simple sentences, about my own life. At first, this felt childish, but something surprising happened. The words started appearing automatically later because my brain had finally practiced retrieval. This is the part nobody explains clearly. Lesson 4. Vocabulary becomes usable only after your brain has used it under light pressure. You do not need stress, you need repetition with intention. I also noticed that when I failed to use a word, panic made it worse. The moment I felt pressure, my brain blocked access even more. Fear shuts down retrieval. That is why vocabulary disappears in meetings, interviews, and group conversations. The problem is not forgetting, it is overload plus pressure. Once I stopped blaming myself, everything changed. I stopped asking, why can't I speak? I started asking, how can I make retrieval easier? That shift matters. If you are listening to this and feel frustrated because your vocabulary never comes out, understand this. You are not missing words. You are missing practice in pulling them out. Vocabulary is not something you collect, it is something you activate. In the next segment, I will explain exactly why memorizing vocabulary lists makes this problem worse and what kind of vocabulary practice actually trains your brain to use words in real conversation. Segment 2. Narrator Daniel. After realizing that my problem was not a lack of vocabulary, but a lack of access, I started examining how I had learned words in the first place. That is when I understood why memorizing vocabulary lists had silently worked against me. Vocabulary lists feel efficient, they give structure, they give a sense of progress. You can count words, you can test yourself, you can feel productive. But productivity is not the same as usability. When you memorize a word from a list, your brain stores it without context. No situation, no emotion, no pressure. It becomes a fact, not a tool. That difference matters more than people realize. In real conversation, your brain does not ask, what does this word mean? It asks, what do I say next? Lists do not answer that question. Lesson 5. Words learned in isolation have no direction. They exist, but they do not know where to go. This is why learners often say, I know the word, but I don't know how to use it. The brain has meaning, but no pathway. Another problem with lists is speed. When you memorize many similar words together, your brain stores them as a group. Later, when you try to speak, your brain has to search through that group. That search takes time. Conversation does not give you time. Lesson 6. The more options your brain has, the slower retrieval becomes. This is why simple English often sounds more confident. Fewer choices, faster access. I noticed this clearly when I stopped learning synonyms. Instead of learning 5 words for the same idea, I picked one and practiced using it everywhere. My speaking became faster, not richer. But faster is what allowed me to continue. Continuity matters more than elegance. Another hidden problem with list learning is false confidence. You recognize words easily on a test or in reading. That recognition feels like mastery. But recognition does not train recall, and recall is what speaking requires. Lesson 7. Recognition creates comfort. Recall creates fluency. Most learners train the wrong one. I also realized something uncomfortable. I was hiding behind vocabulary learning. Learning words felt safe. Speaking felt risky. As long as I kept learning new vocabulary, I could tell myself I was improving, even if I never spoke. Vocabulary became avoidance. That realization was difficult, but necessary, because improvement only happens where discomfort exists. I changed my approach completely. Instead of memorizing words, I started learning phrases. Segment 3. Narrator Daniel. The moment pressure enters the room, vocabulary leaves. I did not understand this for a long time. I thought pressure revealed weakness. I thought it exposed what I did not know. But pressure does something else. It changes how the brain searches. Under pressure, the brain switches priorities. Speed over accuracy, safety over exploration. That switch is useful for survival. It is terrible for language. This is why your vocabulary disappears in meetings, interviews, phone calls, group conversations. The words did not vanish. Access to them was blocked. Lesson 10. Pressure narrows retrieval. When you feel watched or judged, your brain reduces options to avoid mistakes. That reduction feels like emptiness, but it is actually overprotection. I noticed this pattern clearly. Alone, I could form sentences. With friends, I could speak slowly. In public or formal settings, everything collapsed. Same vocabulary, different pressure. So the problem was not learning more words, it was training retrieval under pressure. I started small. I practiced speaking when pressure was low but real, talking to myself out loud while walking, explaining something simple into my phone recorder, responding to short prompts with a timer running. These situations mattered because they introduced mild pressure without fear of judgment. Lesson 11. Vocabulary retrieval improves when pressure is gradual. If pressure is too high, the brain freezes. If it is too low, the brain does not adapt. You need the middle zone. Another mistake I made was trying to be correct first. I focused on grammar, on accuracy, on sounding intelligent. That focus increased pressure instantly. My brain had too many conditions to satisfy. Correctness slowed retrieval. Lesson 12. Fluency grows when the goal is continuation, not correctness. I changed the goal of speaking. My new goal was not to say the best sentence, it was to keep speaking, even if the words were simple, even if the grammar was imperfect, even if I repeated myself. Continuity trained my brain to stay open. This is important. When you stop mid-sentence to search for a better word, pressure spikes. When pressure spikes, retrieval shuts down further. So I learned to replace words instead of searching for them. If a word did not come, I used another. If the sentence felt weak, I continued anyway. This felt uncomfortable at first, but it worked. Lesson 13. Replacing words is faster than searching for them. Native speakers do this constantly. They adjust mid-sentence, they simplify, they move on. Learners try to be perfect and freeze. I also noticed that vocabulary access improved dramatically when I spoke in shorter sentences. Long sentences increase cognitive load. They give the brain more to manage at once. Lesson 14. Short sentences protect retrieval. Simple structure, clear idea. Then another sentence. This approach reduced pressure automatically. Another shift helped even more. I slowed down physically. I breathed before speaking. I relaxed my shoulders. I spoke slightly slower than my thoughts. This calmed my nervous system. And when the body calms, the brain retrieves better. Language is not just mental, it is physical. Lesson 15. A calm body retrieves vocabulary faster. I had never considered this before, but once I did, vocabulary stopped feeling slippery. I want to be very clear here. You do not lose vocabulary under pressure, you lose access. Access can be trained. The key is not to eliminate pressure, that is impossible. The key is to teach your brain that pressure is survivable. Small pressure, often with success. This builds trust. Once trust forms, vocabulary appears more reliably. I noticed something else. After weeks of practicing retrieval under light pressure, reading felt different. Words felt more active, more ready. My brain had started linking recognition to usage. This connection is critical. Vocabulary becomes usable when recognition and retrieval are connected through action. If you are listening to this and feel frustrated because your vocabulary disappears exactly when you need it, remember this. Your brain is protecting you, not failing you. Train it gently. Train it gradually. Train it to continue. In the next segment, I will explain how to turn passive vocabulary into active vocabulary using one daily habit that takes less than 5 minutes and works even if you hate speaking practice. Segment 4. Narrator. Daniel. After understanding how pressure blocks vocabulary, I needed a way to fix the problem without forcing myself into stressful speaking practice. I knew that if the solution felt heavy, I would quit. I had done that before. What finally worked was surprisingly small. Not a course, not a routine that took hours, not daily conversations. One habit, less than 5 minutes, and it changed how my vocabulary behaved. The mistake I made for years was trying to activate vocabulary globally. I wanted all my words to be available all the time. That is not how the brain works. The brain activates language situationally. Words become available when they are connected to a clear situation. This led to the most practical lesson of my journey. Lesson 16. Vocabulary becomes usable when it is tied to situations, not definitions. So I stopped asking, what does this word mean? And started asking, when would I actually use this? Every day I picked one short situation, not imaginary, real, explaining what I did today, describing a small problem, giving an opinion about something simple. Then I chose 3 to 5 words I already knew and forced myself to use them in that situation, out loud, slowly, imperfectly. This was not a speech, it was rehearsal for real life. This changed everything, because now my brain knew when to use the word, not just what it meant. Another mistake I corrected was practicing vocabulary alone. I always practiced words in silence, in my head. That felt safe, but silent practice does not train retrieval under pressure. So I added sound. Lesson 17. Words practiced out loud behave differently in your brain. Speaking engages memory, attention, and muscle coordination at the same time. That combination strengthens access. I did not record myself. I did not judge pronunciation. I simply spoke. At first it felt awkward, but awkwardness faded quickly. What mattered was repetition. I used the same words in similar situations for several days. I did not change them. I did not upgrade them. I stayed simple. After a few days, something strange happened. The words appeared automatically later. Not all of them, not always, but enough. Enough to keep speaking. This is how vocabulary becomes active, not through variety, through reuse. Lesson 18. Active vocabulary grows through repetition across similar situations. Most learners repeat words across lists. That trains recognition. You must repeat words across situations. That trains usage. Another powerful change came from limiting myself. I restricted how many words I could use. This sounds counterintuitive, but it worked. When I allowed myself only simple vocabulary, my brain stopped searching, it committed. Lesson 19. Limitation improves retrieval. When options are limited, access speeds up. This is why beginners often speak more fluently than intermediate learners. They have fewer choices. I also learned to accept imperfection fully. I stopped correcting myself mid sentence. I stopped restarting. I finished thoughts even if they sounded wrong. Completion matters more than accuracy. Lesson 20. Finishing sentences trains confidence and access. Every time you finish a sentence, your brain learns that communication is possible. That reduces pressure next time. Another habit sealed everything. After reading something short, I described it out loud using only basic vocabulary. No advanced words, no synonyms, just simple language. This connected reading, vocabulary, and speaking into one loop. Reading fed vocabulary, speaking activated it. Simplicity reduced pressure. This loop worked quietly, daily. I did not feel fluent, but I felt capable. Capability is the real turning point. Once you feel capable, you speak more. When you speak more, vocabulary becomes faster. When vocabulary becomes faster, confidence follows. If you're listening to this and feel stuck because your vocabulary never comes out, remember this. You do not need more words. You need clearer paths to use the words you already know. 5 minutes a day is enough. One situation, a few words, out loud. In the next segment, I will explain how to measure real progress with vocabulary and why feeling slow does not mean you are failing. As segment 5. Narrator Daniel. The most confusing part of this journey was learning how to measure progress. Vocabulary progress is quiet. It does not announce itself, and if you measure the wrong thing, you will believe nothing is changing even when your brain is improving. For a long time, I measured progress by speed. How fast could I speak? How quickly could I answer? How smoothly could I finish a sentence? That was a mistake. Speed is the last thing to improve, not the first. Vocabulary becomes usable in layers. If you judge yourself too early, you will miss every real signal of growth. I had to relearn what progress looks like. The first sign was not faster speech, it was shorter pauses, not no pauses. Shorter ones? Before, when a word didn't come, my mind froze. Silence stretched, panic entered, the sentence died. Now the pause still came, but it did not kill the sentence. I continued, I replaced the word, I finished the idea. That was progress. Lesson 21. Being able to continue is more important than being able to recall the perfect word. Most learners think fluency means saying the right word immediately. In reality, fluency means not stopping when the right word doesn't appear. Another sign appeared in listening. When someone spoke English, I no longer felt overwhelmed by vocabulary. I understood the direction of the idea even if I missed words. That meant my brain was no longer overloaded. Vocabulary had started organizing itself. Lesson 22. When vocabulary becomes usable, understanding feels lighter. You do not strain. You do not chase meaning, you follow it. I also noticed that words began appearing later, not during the sentence, after the sentence. This sounds strange, but it matters. I would finish speaking, then suddenly think of the exact word I wanted. That meant the word was not lost. It was slow. Slow access is still access. Lesson 23. Late recall is a sign of improving retrieval. Most people give up at this stage. They think if the word didn't come instantly, they failed. They didn't. Their brain was warming up. With repetition, late recall becomes faster recall. Another mistake I stopped making was comparing myself to fluent speakers. Comparison destroys accurate measurement. Fluent speakers retrieve vocabulary automatically because their brain has repeated those paths thousands of times. You're building those paths now. Of course, they feel slower. Speed comes from familiarity, not intelligence. Lesson 24. Vocabulary speed grows from repetition, not talent. I also learned to stop testing myself aggressively. Vocabulary tests measure recognition, not usage. They make you feel smart or stupid, but they do not reflect speaking ability. Instead, I measured one thing only. Could I express my idea with the words I had? If the answer was yes, progress happened, even if the sentence was simple, even if the words were basic, even if it sounded imperfect. Communication succeeded. That matters. Another powerful sign appeared in my confidence. Not confidence to speak perfectly, confidence to try. I raised my hand more often. I spoke even when unsure. I entered conversations instead of waiting for the right moment. That behavioral change mattered more than vocabulary size. Lesson 25. Usable vocabulary changes behavior before it changes sound. If you're speaking more, vocabulary is becoming active, even if it feels messy. I want to address a feeling many learners have at this stage: feeling slow. Feeling slow does not mean failing. It means your brain is choosing accuracy and safety while learning new paths. Over time, those paths become automatic. Every fluent speaker was once slow. The difference is they stayed long enough to become fast. I also noticed something important about setbacks. Some days vocabulary flowed. Other days it disappeared again. This fluctuation scared me at first. I thought I was losing progress. I wasn't. The brain does not improve in a straight line. Lesson 26. Inconsistent performance often means the brain is reorganizing. When you push a system gently, it sometimes looks worse before it stabilizes. That is normal. The key is not to panic and return to memorization. Stay with activation. Use the words you know. Reuse them. Finish sentences. That protects progress. If you're listening to this and wondering if your vocabulary problem is improving, stop asking how fluent you sound. Ask better questions. Can I continue speaking? Can I recover from mistakes? Can I express ideas simply? Can I stay in the conversation? If the answer is yes, your vocabulary is waking up. In the next segment, I will explain how to protect active vocabulary long term and how to stop falling back into passive learning habits that undo progress. Segment 6. Narrator Daniel. Once vocabulary starts waking up, the biggest risk is not losing it. The biggest risk is accidentally putting it back to sleep. This happens when learners return to old habits without noticing, memorizing lists, chasing new words, measuring progress by how many terms they know instead of how well they can use them. I almost did this myself. After a few weeks of improvement, I felt confident enough to add more vocabulary again. New words felt exciting, progress felt fast, and slowly, without realizing it, my speaking slowed down again. That experience taught me something important. Lesson 27. Active vocabulary requires maintenance, not expansion. If you add new words faster than you activate old ones, retrieval weakens. Think of vocabulary like a small team working together. If you keep hiring new members without training them, coordination collapses. So I changed one rule. I only allowed myself to add new vocabulary if I could use it in 3 different situations without thinking. That rule protected my progress. Another habit helped even more. I recycled vocabulary intentionally. Every week, I chose 5 words or phrases I already knew and forced myself to use them repeatedly across different days. Not creatively, consistently. Recycling is more powerful than collecting. Lesson 28. Reusing vocabulary strengthens access faster than learning new words. This habit made my speaking feel more stable, fewer sudden freezes, fewer moments of blankness. The words were becoming reliable. Another mistake I avoided was overcorrecting. When vocabulary becomes active, it is fragile. If you criticize yourself too much, pressure returns and access closes again. I learned to separate practice from judgment. When speaking, I focused only on continuing. When reflecting later, I noticed patterns calmly. Lesson 29. Judgment during speaking blocks vocabulary access. Reflection after speaking improves it. This separation kept my brain relaxed during use and curious afterward. I also protected my input. Reading and listening remain part of my routine. Not to learn new words, to reinforce familiar patterns. Input keeps vocabulary accurate, output keeps it accessible. Both are required. Another realization surprised me. Active vocabulary is context dependent. Some words work well in work situations, others in casual talk, others in emotional moments. Expecting all words to appear in all contexts is unrealistic. Lesson 30. Vocabulary lives in contexts, not in your head. This understanding removed pressure. I stopped blaming myself when certain words did not appear. They were not needed in that moment. I also learned to let go of advanced vocabulary goals. Fluent speakers often use simple words with precision. They choose clarity over complexity. I began valuing being understood over sounding impressive. That choice freed my speech. Another subtle change happened in my thinking. I stopped translating vocabulary. Instead of searching for a word, I searched for the idea. Then I expressed the idea with whatever language appeared. Ideas lead, words follow. Lesson 31. Thinking in ideas reduces vocabulary pressure. This shift made speaking lighter. If a word did not appear, the idea still moved forward, and often the right word arrived later without effort. I want to share one last habit that protected my vocabulary long term. I spoke even when I did not feel ready. Not loudly, not publicly, but consistently. Short voice notes, quiet summaries, simple explanations to myself. Consistency matters more than confidence. Lesson 32. Using vocabulary regularly prevents it from going passive again. If you're listening to this and worried about losing progress, remember this. Vocabulary does not disappear suddenly. It slowly becomes unused. If you keep using it gently, it stays available. Protect your progress by staying simple. Use fewer words. Reuse them often. Finish your thoughts. In the next and final segment, I will bring everything together and explain the moment when vocabulary finally stops feeling separate from speaking and becomes part of how you think and communicate. Segment 7. Narrator Daniel. The change did not arrive as confidence, it arrived as calm. For a long time, I thought the moment vocabulary became usable would feel dramatic, like a switch turning on, like suddenly sounding fluent. That never happened. What happened was quieter. I stopped fighting my own language. Before, every conversation felt like a test. My brain searched for the right word, the better word, the correct word. That search created tension, and tension blocked everything. Now, the search softened. I noticed this during an ordinary conversation. Someone asked a simple question. I answered without preparing. The sentence was not impressive. It was not advanced, but it moved forward. That mattered more than anything. Vocabulary had stopped being something I chased, it had become something that followed me. This is the moment most learners misunderstand. Usable vocabulary does not make you sound smart, it makes you sound present. Presence is what keeps conversations alive. Lesson 33. Vocabulary becomes natural when you stop monitoring it. Monitoring creates pressure. Pressure shuts down access. Letting go allows flow. I also noticed that my mistakes changed. Before, mistakes stopped me. Now, mistakes pass through me. I corrected myself naturally, or I didn't correct myself at all. Either way, the conversation continued. That continuation was the real victory. I realized something important about fluent speakers. They are not fluent because they know more words. They are fluent because they are not afraid of losing words. That fearlessness allows speed. Another change appeared in my listening. When people spoke, I no longer waited for vocabulary I knew. I followed meaning. If I missed a word, I didn't panic. I filled the gap automatically. Vocabulary stopped being the center. Communication became the center. Lesson 34. When vocabulary stops being the focus, communication improves. This is why children learn language faster than adults. They're focused on meaning, not correctness. I also stopped labeling words as mine or not mine. Before, some words felt safe and others felt risky. I avoided risky words even if I knew them. Now, that division faded. Words were just tools. If they worked, they stayed. If they didn't, I replaced them. That flexibility mattered. Vocabulary is not a possession, it is a resource. Resources are meant to be used, not protected. I noticed that I began thinking in simpler structures, not because I couldn't do complex ones, but because simple ones worked better. Simple sentences carry ideas faster, they reduce load, they reduce pressure, and when pressure drops, vocabulary appears more reliably. Lesson 35. Simplicity unlocks access. This changed how I practiced as well. I stopped trying to sound fluent. I tried to sound clear. Clarity became my new goal. Clear thoughts, clear sentences, clear direction. Clarity trained my brain to prioritize communication over performance. That shift changed everything. I also realized that active vocabulary had a rhythm. Some days words came easily, other days they felt slower. I stopped judging those days. I understood that the brain has fluctuations. Energy, stress, sleep, mood all affect retrieval. Fluent speakers experience this too. They just don't panic about it. Lesson 36. Consistency matters more than daily performance. As long as I kept using vocabulary gently, progress continued even on slow days. I want to speak directly to you if you feel stuck. If you know English vocabulary but cannot use it, stop asking what you're missing. You're not missing words. You're missing permission. Permission to be simple. Permission to be imperfect. Permission to continue even when words feel slow. The moment you give yourself that permission, vocabulary starts behaving differently. It stops hiding because it no longer needs to protect you from mistakes. In the final segment, I will close this story by explaining the last shift that happens when vocabulary truly becomes part of how you think and how to keep this progress without slipping back into passive learning again. Segment 8. Narrator Daniel. The final shift did not feel like learning, it felt like relief. One day I realized I was no longer thinking about vocabulary at all. Not before speaking, not while speaking, not after speaking. The words were not the focus anymore. The idea was that is when vocabulary truly became usable. For years, vocabulary had felt like something separate from me, something I carried, something I managed, something I protected. Now it felt integrated, like a part of how I thought, not a list I accessed. This is the last stage many learners never reach because they stop too early. They stop when speaking improves a little. They stop when confidence rises slightly. They stop when fear becomes manageable. But integration happens after that. Integration is when vocabulary stops feeling like a resource and starts behaving like instinct. I noticed it in small moments. I interrupted naturally. I